Okay, everyone, welcome um, to an installment of basically a conversation that is, in light of many things, a very, very important conversation. One that talks about advancement, especially being a person of color, specifically a Black person in America. We find that there are times where we're hitting a glass ceiling or we're hitting opposition. We're coming up against some type of barrier. And at that point, we really are looking for information, knowledge, wisdom, something that can help us push through. And so, with that in mind, I have one of my good friends, good brothers, Terrell McCrae, who is going to share his experience with us and hopefully answer some of those burning questions that you may have about advancing in your career, especially in light of the fact that we are Black. So I'm not going to take up any more time. I'm going to turn the mic over to him, allow himself an opportunity to introduce himself, and then we will go through basically a conversation on uncovering some different facets from his experience. And this will be a little bit different than the traditional Q&A format. It's just going to be like you being a fly on the wall, sitting in on our discussion. So at this point, Terrell, I'll turn it over to you if you want to give a little bit of background, why you're passionate about this topic, and then we can just kind of segue into our discussion.
Certainly. So thank you so much for having me. And I think, just to set the stage, I guess, a little bit from my background and, why this conversation is not only a passionate conversation for me, but what kind of expertise I think I bring to the table. I'll answer both of those up front. So I've been an HR practitioner for probably about the last, 14 years or so in some space. I've served as a HR in training and talent development and recruiting and staffing. A lot of generalist work as well. Like, and I always say super generalist, meaning that super HR generalists are the type of generalists that are used to being the HR department of one, if you will. So in the the HR space, we typically call that the HR department of one, meaning your labor relations, you are benefits, you are employee relations, you are compensation, you are all the different facets of HR you are. So I've been a practitioner at the same time in four states, in New York City, and southeastern Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. So I had an opportunity to be a practitioner, in those different spaces. And now in my current role, I am specifically responsible for learning and adult development, as well as performance management. So how do we measure success and get success out of our employees, within that space? So come to this conversation with a good deal of of actual life experience as a person of color myself, and then just practicing in the field. I've had I've had probably at my height about 1,000 employees I was directly responsible for, and in my current role, while I'm responsible for the entire enterprise, I don't directly interact with the entire enterprise at one time. But right now, I have about 40,000 employees who I design and develop programs for in the HR space. So, and my passion for this just simply comes from seeing a lot of the things that people of color don't see. Kind of a peek behind the curtain, if you will, for how managers and leadership and HR think about things. And so I'm always concerned and worried when I see some of the pitfalls that I think people should have seen that they don't. So, my goal through this conversation today is really just to talk about some of the things from my perspective that I think are important for Black people specifically to kind of always keep front of mind as they are working and navigating their career.
Just to start, and this is something that you said to me previously, is you have to play chess when everyone else is playing checkers, and
Yeah.
I love the visual of that, especially since I'm an expert in checkers and I know nothing of chess. So I can always appreciate when people say that, like, okay, I need to get my game up.
Yeah, and
I'll
that
let you jump in on that.
Yeah, no, I mean the idea of checkers in chess is, the level of strategy that's involved, right? And that's not to suggest that there is no level of strategy involved in checkers. As a aficionado of yourself of checkers, I am not downplaying your checkers acumen, but that's simply to say that in chess it is a lot more strategic. But more importantly, the pieces themselves can only move in specific directions in chess. And so, the pawns, can only move in one direction. The bishop is very limited in how it can move. The queen, the king, the knights all have specific roles and only can move in specific directions, right? And so it's not just about strategy, but understanding how the pieces on the board are allowed to move and operate within that system, right?
Very good.
And
Very good.
so, when I think about the role or the responsibility or how I see, Black people, people of color, and I'll use them interchangeably, sorry if it offends anyone, but um, that is very much what happens, right? You have to think, you can't just live in the moment. Number one, you have to be thinking a few steps ahead. And so that idea of chess means that know how you can operate and understand how the rules of the game are set up for you, understand how the board is set, if you will, and understand that every move you make right now is affecting the end outcome of how the overall game, quote unquote, is going to be played.
Oh, that's good. And you harped on something else, knowing the rules of the game.
Yeah,
So, when I've learned checkers, I had to learn the rules, and I see now I have to learn chess. So I will have to jump into the rule book, relating that to the employee or
yeah,
the employer network. How
yeah.
do we find the rules, so to speak?
Yeah, and so I think it's important to frame the rules, if you will, as I see it, in two different contexts. The first context is the idea of understanding your company culture, and the second is understanding your company's policies. And I'll start on the latter, the policy, right? Um, every single employee, the first day, within the first week, in most cases, when you start a new job, they give you something called an employee handbook. Within that handbook, it has a plethora of policies and procedures and how tos and um, all those different things. And what I always find interesting is from an HR perspective, it's a gold mine, of what you can and can't do, should and shouldn't do, right? And it always amazes me how little, especially people of color, employees in general, but especially people of color, pay no attention to what's written inside that policy and handbook. Um, and so there's a few things I think that's important with that. You know, eh, if the policies are created really in many ways to protect the organization and to protect the associate, but let's be clear, they're really there to protect the organization, because when it comes down to litigation, right? When it comes down to somebody got to go to court or an employee is suing, right? The first discovery piece of evidence is almost always what was provided to the employee from a handbook perspective, meaning that if the employee violated or the employer violated it, it was in writing. Right. And so, when I used to work with folks in the union, I always used to make light of it, but I was, half serious is that you could give a union employee and their CBA, their collective bargaining agreement, $6,000, and say, all you need to do is on the 2nd November of the year, ask for this $6,000 on any handwritten piece of paper, turn it over to your supervisor, and they're obligated to give you $6,000. And I will guarantee you that if as long as if you as long as word of mouth doesn't permeate, um, you know, If it does solely depend on folks reading their contract, they would never get it. And you ask me how I know, because I've seen it. I've worked in contracts as a way to just kind of get the contract done, say, great, let's give them a tool allowance or a supply allowance, to kind of keep our costs down. Every employee, well, let's say we'll give them $300 a year. I've done this, $300 a year, and say all they have to do is turn in their receipt for any supplies they've purchased up to $300, and we'll give them within 10 days we'll reimburse them for it. And I would say 90% of the employees never pay attention to it. For several reasons, either because they don't want to spend it out of their pocket, or because they just don't, or most of the time they just don't know what's in the contract. And so, it always amazes me how you can give some really great things to people in writing, and they just won't do it. I think probably one of the greatest sayings I've ever heard is, if you ever want to hide things from people, put it in a book, and they'll never find it.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. And when you think about contracts, I think about, you own an Apple product, I own an Apple product. Whenever you're updating your software, they give you this long, drawn out contract.
Mhm.
And there have been studies that have shown that people don't read it, which is why when you click accept the terms, they ask you again. So
Mhm.
that covers their back,
Right.
because if you click yes twice, the implication is that yes, you know exactly what you're signing,
Right.
but no one's going to go through and read that contract.
Right.
Now, fortunately, Apple's a good product. That is my shameless plug. So I kind of trust at this point that they're operating for my good. But as it relates to working for an employer, yeah, I definitely see the value in reading through the policies.
Yeah, and I mean, and they'll do things like, your policy, or your handbook will cover things like vacation, right? And so, because I want to make this super practical for anybody that may be listening to kind of understand what does this look like in real life, right? And so, a grievance process, for example, if you have an issue with your boss, right? A lot of times, people of color, and again, I have to always preface this, and I'll try to stop doing it so much, but saying, in my experience, I'll see people of color who will get mad at their boss because they feel like their boss did something that was wrong, or a fellow peer did something that was wrong, and they said, I said something to my boss, and my boss didn't do anything, and now they're blaming me for it, or all these crazy things that happen, right? But many times, employee handbooks will have a specific process and procedure for grievances, right? To tell you how to submit it, how to get it on the record, who has to respond, how the response has to be done, these very specific processes, right? But we just want to act on, well, I said something, or I brought it to my boss's attention and he didn't do anything or she didn't do anything. And, my response would be like, well, but you didn't follow the procedure, right? Or another great example that I see constantly is like when people violate ethics, right? Oftentimes, and you may have even experienced this in your own life, people will leave an organization because they feel like the company is unethical. Right.
Right.
They will see people stealing and they'll say, I can't trust this place, or they will think that or their boss or a fellow peer will seemingly be getting away with murder ethically, right? And what always happens 9 times out of 10 is people will blame the company and say, well, this is just a part of the company culture, right? But oftentimes leadership don't know about these things, and every company has every good company has an integrity hotline, right, where you can report these things. But too often, what I see people do, especially people of color, they just automatically assume that these people are corrupt, and they never go through the process of figuring out there's an integrity process to make people aware of these things. Now, if you follow the process, and you've reported integrity issues and you've raised the flags in the way that they've told you to raise them, then I would say most of the times those things are properly addressed. But we'd rather just say there's something wrong with the culture or something wrong with the people, but and just throw up your hands and walk away, when nothing has ever actually been done to formally go through the channels to address those types of concerns, whether it involves you specifically or things that you see, right? So you throw away the
Right.
baby with the bathwater, if you will. The whole
Yeah.
company is corrupt.
Stay tuned for part two of our conversation, Navigating the Company Culture, coming up next. You mentioned a very important word, culture.
Hmm.
And so each of us comes into a company or into anything with our own beliefs and backgrounds and experiences. And sometimes we come up against an employer culture that
Hmm.
is contrary to that.
Yeah.
And we wonder why every day we're banging our head against the wall, wondering why certain things don't happen. So similar to the playbook, taking that example, the guidebook and formal regulations, how would you recommend that you go about learning about the culture and how to operate within the culture so that we can um, kind of direct it in our favor?
Yeah. I mean, every single company, good, bad, and different, has a culture, right? Some companies work really hard at managing their culture, meaning they have, some type of credo or mission statement about the culture. It permeates, the literature that they have. And so some companies it's a lot easier to figure out what the ethos around the culture is. Other companies, not so much. It's kind of just like you pick it up by, osmosis, if you will. It's just a part of the water that you swim in. You keep showing up to work every day, and eventually you'll understand the culture. And I think again, this is specifically for people of color. What I often see is that we don't take the time to understand the culture, because in that path to understanding how the culture really works is going to help you move and progress in your career. And so, again, I like to give examples. So I give examples, right? If you think about an organization, I've worked for two organizations now that call themselves either a flat organization or you may be familiar with a open door organization, right? And that open door organization, simply usually means in any organization that no matter what your level is, whether you're an entry level employee, whether you're a middle level employee, you should have the right to go to anyone, even the president or CEO of the organization, and ask your question or ask for audience with them or ways to communicate with them. And oftentimes people don't, right? But it is not a violation if the culture is embracing of that, and then some cultures begging you to do it, right? People of color are often the ones that use it the least, right? You never see a problem with white people going and having a conversation with their boss's boss, right? Just to say hello, check in with them, or have true meetings with them. Let's talk about, I'm interested in my career. Let me tell me your story, things like that. And I think not understanding how the culture works is harmful to black people if they don't, number one, if they don't understand it, and then number two, if they don't learn how to work within that culture. For whatever reason, what I oftentimes see with people of color, and I've been guilty of this myself, either I don't want to work within the culture because I don't like it, or I think, I'm different and I'm going to operate this way, right? And let me tell you, that never works. It just doesn't. Or you'll get the wrong type of attention and you'll be labeled as someone who doesn't fit in. I don't think they're going to work out here, right? That's Jim Bob's way of saying you don't understand the culture and maybe you shouldn't be working here anymore. And as much as I chuckle about that, there are systems in place culturally again where people who don't assimilate into that or constantly buck against it find themselves in one of two positions. They find themselves as an outsider, constantly looking in. Because they have created a space for themselves where people don't want to pull them in because they've decided that they just won't become one of them, right? That doesn't help your career ever. right? Or they just, again, they throw up their hands and say, like, this culture is not for me, and they leave, and that's okay. Every culture is not for everybody, right? People love from an outside in to talk about Google's culture and Facebook's culture. You bring your dog to work, show up whatever you want, that kind of stuff. That ain't for everybody, right? I've heard so many people who work at those types of firms who said they thought that they would love it, and then they get there and they was like, this doesn't work for me. So, not everybody's culture is everybody else's cup of tea.
Right. That's good. I can definitely apply that to my own work experience, and that was one of the main reasons why I left my prior employer and actually jumped into my current career path. Something good. You're dropping so many nuggets, and I have to be so quick to write these down as you're speaking. Um, you said something about being known for the wrong reasons. Sometimes when you raise the alert, you do it in a way that's contrary to either the handbook or the
Mm,
actual culture. So turning that on its head, what I'm getting at, or what it seems like you're saying, is that you have to be known for something special and indispensable. You have to be irreplaceable.
mm,
And I've worked for past organizations where in the back room, uh, senior management are making decisions on who gets promoted and who doesn't, and it boils down to who is irreplaceable, who is just a cog in the machine. So if you could, based on your experience, if you could let us know some tips from your experience on what can we do as employees to be special, to be indispensable, to appear irreplaceable, so to speak.
yeah, I mean, everybody is going to be known for something, right? Good,
Right.
whether you like it or not. Every single individual within an organization is going to be known for something. Um, you could either create that narrative yourself or not and let other people create that narrative and label you themselves. Like, it's going to happen. We all know the person in the office is going to heat up fish in the microwave, and that's Fishy Francine. Like,
Yes.
and that's what she's known as. She's known as the one that's always, there's always a person that's going to pull the black card. I ain't get the promotion because I was black, right? And then they labeled as, the person that's going to pull the race car puller, right? I worked in organizations where, because people refused to manage their brand well, that labels were drawn from them. And this is the thing that I don't know, and it wasn't until I got into a senior HR position that I really fully understood this, right? Best in class organizations, sometimes not so best, but best in class organizations will do something called succession and talent reviews, meaning that they will take a landscape, on somewhat of a frequent basis, maybe as little as every year. Sometimes some organizations do it maybe on an every 6 months basis, some do it every 2 years, but on some type of frequency table, they are doing two activities: succession and talent review. Succession is simply looking at what are the critical roles, right? That fall within that organization, roles that we really cannot afford to have vacancies in because of the subject matter expertise needed for that particular role. So you have to hone someone for it. And so what the succession does is who is within our organization that we can start to groom to understand that role, right? And they'll literally the conversation comes down to people, right? Who is out there who we could see, who's expressed interest, who could fill these kind of critical roles. That succession talent review, and I'm really giving like boilerplate definitions on this, but talent review is really taking a look at all the talent within the organization, and we've all heard the idea of the WalMarts of the world who get rid of their bottom 10% performers, every year, things like that. But they look at the entire organization within work groups and say who are the lowest performers, who are the top performers, and let's decide to make some cuts or increases in pay and things like that. And so to get back to the original question, I think what sometimes I see people of color do a really missed opportunity there is to really be able to brand themselves and brand yourself in several different ways. More specifically, be known for something that's indispensable, meaning that what skill or trait do you fulfill within your job function, your role, your department, that nobody else wants to do? And, and that comes around several different ways. I think, um, are you the person that every time there's a need for, for somebody to work an extra shift, or, are you just walking out the door and saying, I'm not doing it, right? So you might have developed a reputation as being someone who is not committed, right? Whenever there's a hard assignment, do you lean into the hard assignment, and say, this isn't what I want to be doing, but there's a need for it, and I'm going to step up, right? And so, um, I always ask people, what is your expertise? What do people come to you for? What do you think is your thing that you do better than anybody else? And, that's an important question, because that starts to have you think about your expertise. I remember, I was working at this financial firm, and I applied for a job that I thought was nowhere in my wheelhouse, like like nowhere. And I remember going on the interview and sitting across from these two managers, and they were asking me questions, and it was to be specific, it was an accounting type role, right? I'd worked in financial services for years, but never done accounting this specific. And I went out in a wing and a prayer, to be perfectly honest. And they called me and gave me the job, and I couldn't believe it. I was floored. I get in the job, and I'm doing this job for like a year, and I'm horrible at it. Like, I'm not very good at it at all. I mean, I'm being perfectly honest. Other people on the job are accounting around me. They had all had finance and accounting degrees. I didn't. I was a businessman. I just didn't understand. And so one day, I don't know, maybe after I was out of the role. So maybe this is 3 years after I'd hired it. Maybe I did the role for a year and a half, 2 years. I was having lunch with the lady who hired me. Her name was Tina. And I said, Tina, can I ask you a question? I said, I was really bad as a fund accountant. Can I ask, why you hired me? And she said something I will never forget. She said, Terrell, in your interview, um, we felt really strongly that you were someone who could create a sense of community on our team, that no one of the 15 people we had on the team, there was no one who was uniting the team as a peer, right? Management can do but so much, and what we knew that the job was going to be a challenge for you, but we actually needed you to do something a lot stronger than be able to just do the job. We knew you could do the job, like that's brass tacks. We knew it was going to be a challenge, but you could do it. More importantly, we hired you because you came across as someone who could just rally people, help them stay motivated. And I was like, huh. And she said, and you did it, right? She said the mood changed within the first month that you were on the team. And she said, we kept you, and hired you to simply for that reason. And you did exactly what we wanted you to do, and did probably exceeded in some ways. And I was taken back because I just could not understand, um, that was an expertise that someone saw in me, and I owned it, right? So just be known for something, right? And be known for doing it really, really well.
I love that because those are rules that we can use as people. Companies also do that as well. It's called the UPV, unique perceived value. So when you think about technology or you think about smartphones, you might think about Apple. When you think about ordering goods and services or like products, you may think of Amazon. That's ingrained inside of us because these companies go to extra lengths to ensure that they have a unique perceived value, understanding what makes them distinctive, and then being able to convey that messaging. And so marketing is not accidental. Marketing is just a way of being able to take that UPV, unique perceived value, and being able to convey it to a broader audience. And so, and not to put words in Terrell's mouth, but from what I'm getting from that is each of us has a UPV, whether it's good or bad. But according to what he's saying, if there's something that we do that is good, make sure you know what that is and be able to consistently brand that,
Yeah.
be able to consistently bring that up in a conversation, even if it's a conversation that doesn't even relate. Make sure you're redirecting that back into your UPV to remind people that you have this indispensable talent so that you'll be top of mind.
Yeah, you actually, bring up a point that I also think is really important, and again, one that I didn't fully understand the way it worked until I was a little bit later in my career. But this idea that you may not know, you don't see you the way the world sees you. You see the world and yourself the way you see you, but other people will see you differently, right? And so, one of the really important things I think people of color um, and again, maybe anybody in general should do is have some way, either whether it's a trusted group of peers who will tell you, when what you're doing well, where your opportunity areas are, like people who work with you, right? But again, there's a trust factor and a vulnerability that you have to have there. So that's one way. Another way is if you can ever participate in the 360. Um, and for those of you that don't know what a 360 is, a 360 is just simply where you get feedback on how people view you from people who work with you, from people who have worked with you in the past, those who are above you, those who are beneath you. 360, an all around view of you as an individual. And it's usually anonymous, and usually you have to have like a minimum number of people participate, and then it all spits out on a report. And then ideally, you go through it with a coach who debriefs you on your 360, and it's not just blindly given to you as a report because it can be very harmful. Trust me, I've done it. Um, I've received a report without having the context properly set and prepared for the emotional and psychological thing of going through that data. Um, but it is so eye-opening because people will say things, you will read things and learn things about yourself that people will never say to you as a professional, right? And so it's a mix of how they see your work acumen. And so if you have an opportunity, like I said, there's a few ways you could do it, either do a 360 evaluation or do a phone a friend, if you will, or phone a peer. Again, and I often think it's the people, if you can't do a 360 and you're looking to get, feedback from people whom you work with, don't maybe lean on the people that don't necessarily you talk to or all the time, or aren't your work family. Your work family, like your immediate family, may tell you the very best about you and may not give you the real feedback. So be okay with asking, like, Jim, who eats tuna fish sandwiches, in his office, and just like, talk to him and say, hey, can I ask, a question? I don't know why I keep talking about fish today, but I guess that's my pet peeve in the office is fish. But I think that's really important to be able to understand that perceived value as well.
Yeah, and something good about that perceived value. I'm mindful it's helpful while you're in the office, but also I noticed that there are some people that get promoted and some that don't. And if you ever ask someone why they were promoted, those people, over the course of a conversation, they understand that unique perceived value. And some people will even go even further to assign a dollar amount to that value. For example, I do market research better than anyone else. I know what the value of that is. So when I negotiate for a position and a salary, I'm making sure I'm providing that background. Negotiations. Part 3 of our conversation coming up next. There are some people that will negotiate, some people that will ask for a promotion, and others that just stay in their place and take what's given to them. Do you have any advice for professionals, be it early career or in the middle of their career, on
Yeah.
using that unique perceived value to command higher position and better salary?
Wow, that is a load. We could have a whole podcast just on that question alone.
There goes your part two.
Wow. That's a good question. I'll start by just simply saying this. Much is lost for the want of asking. Or a closed mouth don't get fed. you know.
Right.
So, I don't know what it is, but you know, so here this cuts both ways. So here's what I'll say. I've never seen a person of color be ever afraid to tell their boss that they want more money.
Yes.
That's one thing that I can say. I've never had my entry level employees come to me and say anything about wanting to make more money, right? Um, so I don't think people of color have a problem asking for more money. What I think the opportunity might be is asking and thinking about what do they have to contribute when they come to the table and ask for more money or ask for their promotion, right? The promotions are not given; they are earned. So, how then do you bring yourself to the conversation to be compensated for? And let me just put this right on the table. You are never going to be paid what you are worth, point blank. But if you felt like you were woefully undercompensated for your value, then there's a few things that you can do. You can go to your boss and you can say, look, and I always believe in making a case, right? Don't come to me and ask me for more money if you don't present your case. Why are you worthy of more money? Is it your tenure? Do you have a unique skill set? When I look at the skills and qualifications of that job responsibility, you had better be firing on all cylinders of everything that was in that role before you even come to me and ask for a raise, right? Um, what does your development path look like? Have you talked about what your career goals are? I'm always surprised about how people want more money, but they've never had a conversation with their boss or their boss's boss around what they see their career path being, right? Um, because if your boss believes, or most of the time, if you're a good worker and you believe that there is a path and that you're valued, there's a development plan that's going to be put together for you. And typically with that comes along compensation. Most organizations aren't afraid to make an investment in someone who is going to increase their bottom line, right? And so then the question becomes, are you an asset or a liability? And so I think it's important now that you first ask yourself that question, what are you? What if and you can be honest. I think every person can be honest with themselves and look at their work, look at what they bring to the table, look at their peers, more importantly, right? Because I benchmark against my peers, right? On my worst day, I'm still better than there have been, not today, but in my past, there have been days on my worst day, I was still 20% better than the second best person on my team, right? And so I'm constantly benchmarking myself against my peers and my peer group. Um, so, I said a lot there. The one last thing I'll say on this particular topic is if you feel you are undercompensated, that you are not earning what you should, you've had the conversations, you've done everything right, do not be afraid to take your career into your own hands and think about moving. Um, and moving, however you contextualize that word moving careers, moving departments, moving states, moving countries, whatever you need to do in order to be able to do that. Um, Sometimes it takes that in order for you to get what you deserve. And again, we get comfortable. I see people of color. We are committed. Once we find a place that we feel comfortable, we're accepted. We set in like an Alabama tick. Like, we ain't leaving. They have to pry me out of here. But that can be to your own detriment too. You have to be willing to do the hard thing in order to sometimes make a little bit more coin.
Yeah, once again, you're dropping so many nuggets, and this could go for like another 5 hours. Um, as I'm looking at our time, we have a little over 10 minutes, so I'm gonna try to rapid fire a couple of things. But I'd be remiss if I didn't develop just a little bit one of your last points. Uh, Either you have to understand your career path at your current organization or take a chance and go elsewhere. A lot of times we do get comfortable, and with that comfort comes a fear that the grass is not going to be greener on the other side. I would push back on that and say the grass is not a condition of the organization. The grass is a condition of you. If you leave
Amen.
a job and you go to another job, that other job might be brown grass. You're called to be the water. In fact,
Right.
I would even take that one step further and say that the organization hires you because they see you as the water.
Mm.
We can't always look at having a situation that is perfectly groomed for us. Sometimes our unique perceived value is the fact that, similar to what Terrell said in his past experience on that accounting team, the employer saw him as the water, the one that would allow that grass to be nurtured and to be that green grass. So I would challenge you to look outside of your direct line of sight, look to your periphery, and understand that, yes, there may be a situation that you're not comfortable in and you want to take that leap and go to another organization. There is some fear and apprehension that comes with that, but that situation is going to be what you make of it. And as long as you understand the culture, like Terrell had mentioned, and read the handbook, and you're going to talk to your boss and your boss's boss in some cases, then you can find ways to make that situation work to your advantage. Advice for the Professional Black Woman. Part 4 of our conversation coming up next. There's a difference between men and women in the workplace in terms of demanding salary, demanding a promotion. And we had a great conversation with a group of Black women a couple of weeks ago.
Mm.
And some of this information was eye-opening to them. Are there any tips or any words of wisdom that you would give specifically to a Black woman to help her advance in her career and to not just deal with the fact that she is a woman, but also deal with the stigma, quote unquote, that she's Black?
Yeah.
Any nuggets that you have for our sisters?
Yeah, I would say, the first, one of the ones that I see quite often, and this is more not against them, but just against, our bigoted society that we live in, is just always be careful about how you deal with office politics, right? When you get into a disagreement, the arguing verbally and raising your voice and elevation, while it may be acceptable for, some other people, for whatever reason, Black women will get stigmatized, right? Especially if the argument or disagreement is with another woman. They will be perceived as catty. They will be perceived as, you know, someone who can't, who can't just get into a disagreement, right? And it's completely unfair because a man will never be called quote unquote catty, right? A man is never going to be seen when when he yells or something like that, he's just having a bad day. But when a woman does it, especially a Black woman, well, she can't handle pressure, and it's an unfair assessment. And this is what women have to deal with in the workplace, but Black women have to be especially careful about managing their emotions in the workplace, because the perception is just different. And I think that's probably one of the big things as I think about it. The other thing is, women have to be extremely careful about their natural ability to nurture, right? And so I'm going to try to unpack this slow. I know it's rapid fire, but I'm going to try to unpack this slow so y'all don't come for me. But women naturally want to nurture. And what I see too often in the workplace is that women get shifted, and it's a real thing, look it up, called office housework, meaning that women will automatically, after the meeting is over, they'll be the default for cleaning up. Right. If food needs to be ordered, it's usually the woman who's asked to order the food. Or if everybody needs a drink, she's the person that's doing that, and things like that. And so, because there's this nurturing side of women, because they do it naturally to want to take care of people, right? But in the office, that can almost be backfired. They can, on a subconscious level, people are automatically thinking like, they'll default to the women, and women have to be be able to stand up and say no, or great, yeah, I'll do it this time, but let's get a schedule together, and that way Chris can do it next week or next month, and then Jim can take it next month, and then Susan, so that there is shared responsibility, right? Those tasks of what is office type housework needs to be something that women don't just feel they're asked to do and then take on because they've been asked to do it, and they have to be able to step back and say, well, why am I the person that's being asked to do it, right? Um, and wait for the answer. Right,
Very
and
important.
wait
Yes.
for the answer, and really be able to just do that. And I know, again, it sounds completely unfair, but I see it way too often. When there's food that needs to be cooked, who's looked at? The women, for the office and things like that. And it's a shared responsibility. There's men and women in the office. Don't allow those those quote unquote feminine tasks or motherly tasks to automatically be pushed upon you because that's what society thinks you should be doing, and then don't just grin and say, yes, of course, I'll do it. No, push back on those things.
Right. Tactfully.
Tactfully, yes.
Tactfully. 'Cause-
Politely.
yes. 'Cause I can just see someone say, "Well, I was on this great podcast," and someone said I should push back.
Yeah, don't let your neck start swiveling. Why are you asking me? Like yeah.
Right. And that also underscores another point of knowing your enemy better than they know themselves.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that your employer is your enemy. I'm taking that line from The Art of War,
Mhm.
that timeless classic that teaches many lessons
Right.
about work and life. I recommend you read the book, or at least get cliff notes and just pull some nuggets from that. But yes, know your employer better than they know themselves. Know your boss better than they know themselves. Get a notebook as you go on your weekly one-on-one, and if your boss has pain points, write some of those pain points down and see if there's something that you can do to alleviate that stress. Your boss, management, CEOs are at the end of the day people, and people have things that bother them. And if you can be the remedy to whatever it is that is bothering them, then that could be your unique perceived value, and then you'll have a leg to stand up on when you're asking for promotions, for job revisions, or anything else that's in line with your career endeavors. The conclusion to our conversation coming up right after the break. At the 5 minute mark, Terrell, this is open mic. So you have discussed many things. You have talked and dropped a lot of nuggets on a lot of different topics. But I'm going to give you the last 5 minutes to really develop or to present a new piece of information that you want the audience to take away from this conversation.
Yeah. When I think about some of the biggest pieces or challenges that I had in my career, it came down to I didn't know what I wanted to do, right? Um, or I was too scared to go after what I thought I wanted to do because I thought it was too big, right? I thought that, and I want people to hear me when I say this, I thought that the people who were at the very top of the organization, senior managers, senior leaders, directors, vice presidents, I thought that they were extremely smart and that there was this self-doubt that crept up inside of me that was telling me that I couldn't do that because I wasn't smart enough or because I was too black or maybe I wasn't black enough in some cases, right? And so let me just encourage somebody with this idea. um, after living now, I've been working since I was now 18 and corporate, mind you. I've been working in corporate now since I was 18 years old. And I've had the wonderful experience of having three CEOs, presidents of companies as quasi friends, mentors, or just being able to have casual conversations with them. And what has occurred to me is that I don't care what level someone is in leadership within an organization. They're all people, right? They don't know everything. And they have to have this certain type of vibrato in some cases because they know so many people are looking to them. But guess what? They are no smarter than you. They may have a specific area of expertise that they do really well, but they are all trying to figure this out too, right? And so give yourself some slack, cut yourself some grace as you come along in your journey and just understand that nobody has it all together. Everybody is trying to figure this out and just be willing and able to understand that in time, if you just accept what you don't know and ask for help and try to close that gap, that knowledge gap, if you will, you can do it too. I have not limited myself to any position anymore. I've had to just figure out what do I want to do and what don't I want to do, right? I think more than me knowing what I did want to do was just it was like I didn't as what do I don't want to what do I not want to do, and that actually helped push me in the direction of what I should be doing, right? um like I got out of accounting because I hated numbers, right? I hated the tediousness of that stuff. So I was like, okay, clearly finance and accounting is not for me. I love people. Okay, what makes sense? Like, where can I interact with people a little more? I feel safe in policy. So HR became a place that just felt like home to me. Um, so yeah, I hope that helps.
Yes, definitely, definitely, and I think that's a good way to close the conversation. And it touches on everything that you have talked about during the course of this conversation. The fact that if you're working for a company, grab the handbook, know the handbook. There is so much power in knowledge. So take the time to invest in the handbook. Also understand that every company has a culture. So if just be a fly on the wall, see how these conversations are developing, understand who the decision makers are, understand what the pain points are, understand how the successful people navigate the environment, and really understand that culture. Understand your unique perceived value. That will help you in conversations. That will help you in times where you're asking for a change to your position, negotiations, and everything. I would argue that you need to know your unique perceived value in life in general. Understand where you can bring value to a situation. And also, but before we close, I just want to stress that one of the important things that you can add to anything that Terrell has mentioned is you have to have a strong network as well. Terrell said something very poignant earlier in our conversation, that he's been on teams where he has been the alpha dog, that even on his worst days, he is better than everyone else from an intellectual and from a drive perspective. But I would challenge that you do not want to be the smartest person in the room. And if you don't have a strong network in your employee network, then you have to surround yourself with professionals outside of work that can drive you, that are able to understand who you are and push you gently. And you also need to have people that you can be vulnerable with, people that you can just strip back all these layers that we have heaped upon ourselves and say, it's tough being a Black man in corporate America. I need some guidance. I need some wisdom. You need to be able to have those transparent and vulnerable conversations. And so hopefully this is giving you an opportunity to really take some nuggets and use them as you advance in your career, as you push back against the system, as you look to mentor others and help them in their career path. But just understand that it's also important that you're having these conversations within your own peer network. and understand what works in their situation in hopes that you can help better yourself and also help better someone else. So that is our time. We thank you so much for your patience. We hope that this has been a blessing to you, and we're encouraged at how this conversation will turn out next time, as we continue to talk about ways that we could push forward, keep the conversation going, and advance in our spheres of influence. So thank you once again for your time, Terrell. I don't want to take your thunder. I'll allow you a chance to say goodbye to everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.
There you go. All right. Thanks everyone so much. Stay encouraged and uplifted. God bless.
Bless you.